Hello and welcome to my channel. This is the second tutorial on Vue.js in which we will be creating a dynamic table component. Those types of components are very common in different libraries. The one thing they have in common is the ability to display an array of identical data in a tabular fashion. Of course, our component will be very limited in functionality compared to the ones provided by libraries such as Vuetify. However, it will demonstrate the basic mechanism of creating reusable components for iterating over data. Let's get started! As usual, we are starting with a minimal Vue.js application in a single HTML file being served on port 8080 by live server npm package. If you want to see how to use it, please take a look at my previous video about creating an application layout component with Vue.js. We will begin with defining the API for our component. This is a little bit similar to what you would be doing when practicing the TDD discipline, only this time we'll be just doing it with HTML. So our component will have a definition of columns to be displayed and a set of rows with the data to display. Now that we have the API, we will begin by creating the template for our component. It is a simple HTML table, which is to be expected for tabular data. The table will have a row of headers, in which titles will be taken from the definition of columns. Please note, this is the first way to customize our component. At this point, it is apparent that the column needs to consist of a field name and a title. The field name is the name of the property in each row that contains some data. Respectively, the title is the text being displayed in the header of a column. Now it is time to iterate over the provided data in the body. We will once again iterate over columns in order to create a set of cells for each row. This time, instead of using a configuration value directly, we will display the value of the configured field from a data row. Also, in order to make the rendering configurable, we will create a slot named by the columns field. That way, we'll be able to render specific cells individually. More on that later. Now that we have our template defined, let's create the component definition for Vue. Our component needs to know about the layout we just created and about the two props it needs to receive: the columns definition and the rows with data. Now that we have defined the component, let's create data field for columns and rows. To create the definition of columns, we need to know the format of the data we'll be displaying. Please note that this happens on the level where we are using the DynamicTable component, not when we are defining it. In this way, the component retains its universal nature and can be used in different situations. It looks like our data has a name, email, and address fields that we can use to demonstrate the usability of the component. So let's define those three columns to be displayed. Let's also define a reactive data element for storing the users. Now that we have all the data elements defined, let's load the users from the JSON placeholder service in the mounted lifecycle hook. We will extract the method for loading users into separate function to keep things separated. As you can see, the address field is actually an object. It would be great if we could pick and choose which properties of that object we will be displaying and in what form. To do that, we will define a template for a named slot called address. For that to work, we need to pass the row data. We will rename it here to user for it to read more natural in the template. All the data bound in the slot become available as properties of a single object in the template. That is why we were using the structuring syntax to retrieve and rename its properties. One last thing to do is to separate the city and street, because you can't make where one ends and the other starts. Now, for the final touch, it would be great to provide some capability to style certain columns of data. For that case, we'll be extending the definition of column to have a classes property. For demonstration purposes, we will style the name column so that it shows bolded in the template. To make it work, we will bind the classes property to the class attribute on each cell. And here we have it, a dynamically generated and highly customizable data table component for use in every occasion where you need to display tabular data. Okay, that's it for today's video. If you found it interesting, give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to not miss any new tutorials and click that bell button to get notified when new content is available. Till next time, bye bye!